Hello and welcome. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you, wherever you are and whatever you're doing. Today's video is my Jimi Hendrix kit guitar build that I made. This is all the episodes put into one video so that you can decide if you want to watch episode by episode or if you want one long video. It's basically so that you get whatever you really want. Some people prefer the episode version and some want just one really long video. Here is the guitar, and I hope you'll enjoy these videos. If you've already seen the series with all the episodes, thank you so much for watching them. It makes me really happy to know that there are people out there who enjoy the videos I make. And if you're new, happy to have you here. It makes me happy to see that new people find my channel, so great to see you. And hopefully you'll enjoy this video. There is a playlist if you want to go and watch the actual episodes, but everything will be in this video. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know in the comments below if you do. And until next time, Happy New Year and Merry Christmas. Stay awesome and cool, and go and enjoy your friends and family and the beautiful company they bring. So when you unbox the package where your kit is in, you'll have one box that looks like this. And if we open this up, it will be your hardware, your strings. You'll also get one of these cables, but most importantly, at least for this video, you'll get the pickguard and the electronic that it comes with. So let's take this out. We'll put these things back in here and we'll take a look at the pickguard. So this is what you get. This is what it looks like. And at first glance, it all looks nice, but at closer inspections, you will see that there is a lot of cables and it's actually really messy and it could look a lot neater than this. And so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna clean this up, because the more cables you have and the more like tangled they are and bunched up around, the more noise you'll have. Connections like this, they might seem like something that you want because it means that you won't have to solder, but it's better to learn how to solder and to do a good job than to use these. These will introduce noise. So we're gonna remove these and just try to learn to solder. So let's start. Now obviously we have the pots here and the switch here, and you could definitely upgrade. This is one of those things where I'm not gonna tell you that you shouldn't upgrade these parts, because most likely it would be a good investment. Okay, so if you open up your guitar and you have a switch like this one that I have right here, it looks like this from the side, from the back. If you have inexpensive guitars and you've opened them up, you most likely know how these look. You'll have three legs here that two of them will have wires. The third one is just the connection for the bridge, and since there is no pot for the bridge, there is usually not a connection here. Then on the other side you have three wires here. They are the pickups, and it's just, you know, the bridge, the middle and the neck. And then you have two connections in the middle, and sometimes you'll see them be connected together and sometimes you'll see them not be connected together. And that is because one row is separated from the other row. So you'll have four connections, and they are connected. But you want to connect the rows together by soldering these two together. But some of these switches are a little bit newer than the others. And if you look on the side here, down here, you can see a tiny little metal plate that are already connecting these two together. So you can take your model meter, and if you hold one connection here and one here, you get a beep. And if you do get a beep, that means that they're already connected by the way they are built and not by how you solder them together. So you don't necessarily have to solder them together. But if you take a measurement and you don't get a beep, that means that there is no connection between them. And that's why you'll see that these two are soldered together. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, leave a comment and I'll try to explain it even better. So now we're gonna start off by heating up our soldering iron, and we are gonna remove these ground connections. So we just hold this in place and heat it up, and we can pull them apart. And we're just gonna heat them up so that we can get them away from each other like this. And I'm just gonna untangle them a little bit and get them out of the way. And now we are just gonna heat up the first connection here, which is we're gonna take the bridge pickup first. Actually, it might be a good idea. So we're just gonna heat up this connection so that it melts and pull the wire out like so. And here we're gonna get to the main thing that I really wanted to make about the electronics, and that is these wires were just clumsily put together, and they don't need to be. So I'm just gonna put this to the side like this, and hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing. I'm just taking these two wires and I'm just gonna spin them around like this, trying to make it look really neat. And I know that someone is gonna watch this video and be like, ugh, do I really have to do this? You don't have to do this. It's not I'm not forcing anyone to do anything. I'm just saying that you will definitely hear an improvement in your guitar. That there is so much noise in single coils by the nature of how they're made, and this is just gonna help. And now we're gonna tuck this up to here, and we're gonna hold this. I'm gonna pull this over the pickup like this and to the pot where it's supposed to go, and we'll take a tiny bit of electrical tape. And when I said before we're not gonna add stuff, I obviously meant we're gonna add things like a little bit of tape. So yes, you're gonna have to buy tape. I'm sorry. And if you don't have a scissor, you're gonna have to buy a scissor as well. And so we hold this up there. We give ourselves a little bit of slack, but just a little bit, not something crazy. And we just put a piece of tape here to hold everything nicely together, like this. And then we're gonna pull this ground over to this dot of solder, and we're gonna cut away. So, something like that. Now, we can strip this back and solder it in place. Put on some new solder and hold it the way you want to put it. Heat it up, let everything flow together. Now it is in place, like that. And now we can pull this up towards here, and we can sort of get some sort of estimation of how much wire we actually need. And I feel like we could cut off a little bit, but it's going to be so little that I don't think it's going to matter. So I'm just going to heat this up and solder it back in. So on this particular pickup, we removed a fair bit of ground wire. See here. Now that on its own might not be that much, but we're going to go to the next pickup and we're going to do the same thing again. And we'll see how much we get from this one. And then we're going to go through all the other ones. And I think that by the end we'll see that we actually did remove a lot of wire. So I'm just going to twist these around. And if you open up something expensive, and it doesn't have to be like super expensive, but just like a guitar that is maybe 500 euros or something, you know, which is a lot of money, but it's not, you know, extremely expensive, it's or something like that. But you know, you'll most likely see if you look inside them, or at least I hope you will inside them. Otherwise, I will be disappointed. You'll see, you see something similar. And so now we'll just cut off a tiny bit of electrical tape again. And you don't actually have to use electrical tape. You could use something else, like masking tape or something. But I feel like doing this the proper way, once and for all, is better. And I'm just going to tape these together again, like so, and make everything look somewhat neat at least. A super good job of keeping these things together. And now I can pull this black wire back, and I can go in underneath the other black wire. You can see, hopefully, it becomes almost like they are twisted together as well. So I'm going to cut this off. I wish I had a really good way of showing you how I do these things, but hopefully. And then we just pre-tin this as well, and we hold it into the same place, the other wire, and we just melt everything together. Just gonna add a tiny bit of solder and hold it to the place. Wait a couple of seconds, and then we can let go. And so now these wires are twisted around each other, and they're twisted over here. And now we can go back with this wire, and we can twist it around this one. And it stops, or at least it reduces, maybe you should say, because it doesn't stop it, 100%, but it reduces electrical interference. So by twisting these around, we are doing a little bit. And here I feel like this is a little too long now. You could probably keep it, but I'm gonna remove a little bit of it and peel back a little bit of it. And there are tools for peeling back the plastic cover on wires. I'm just sort of used to using a scissor by now, that it kind of feels weird to me to do something else. And then we just put this back in its place as well. And as you can hopefully see, the wires, we still have this one left. So let's remove this real quick. But if you look at these two pickups here, I hope you can see that they are really like neatly folded in. They are a little bit loose, but they're not that loose. And everything is sort of twisted together. This might not seem like a lot, especially not the red piece that is super little. But at least on these black wires, that's actually like an entire cable that could have gone in between the pickups. I mean, in between the pots. And so, yeah. And so now I'm just going to take the last pickup here, and I'm just going to twist the wires around again. And if you don't think that this means anything, I actually made a recording of the Telecaster kit, the one that I made into Mike Bloomfield's guitar. I actually did a recording with that before when I just put the kit together for the review of the kit, and a recording afterwards when I had taken the guitar apart and rebuilt it, and I actually did twist all the wires around. So there's gonna be a video coming where you get to actually hear the difference between a guitar where the wires are twisted and a kit guitar where the wires are the way they came. Obviously that's a Telecaster, and I also didn't do anything about the electronics down here in that video. I just twisted the pickups. But I thought that would be interesting, so hopefully you'll watch that video, and I think it's interesting too. Now I'll pull this wire here over the middle pickup, and I'll go under and start twisting it around the middle pickup's wire, just to try and get, again, to remove noise and interference. And they are single coil pickups, so they'll never be 100% silent, but they can be a little bit quieter. And then I'm gonna twist this wire around as well, and I am somewhat failing at showing you what I'm doing. I'm gonna try to give you a little bit of a close-up, and then I'm just soldering the pickup back in its place, like so. Then if we zoom in a little bit, hopefully you can see. We have one pickup here, where the wires get twisted to the next pickup, and the wires get twisted around that pickup's wires, who are also twisted around. So all pickup wires are meeting here, and all the ground connection are being pulled off to the side here, where they are soldered to the place. And this braid that it basically looks like from all the pickups wires are going up to the switch, and here they are all soldered back in their place. So now it looks much neater. You have the wires that are being pulled in the right direction. Everything is very neat, and they're going to the switch. And now we can just look at the wires over here. These wires we are going to ignore for now, and we're just going to braid them together and cut them to size when we put the guitar together. So there's going to be a little bit of electronics in the end, but just remember for now that I'm going to twist these two wires together as well, like this, so that they are also twisted. But there's no real point for me to go through that right now, because these wires are going to the output jack and to the claw on the back of the trem, so they're not super important right now. I'm going to desolder this cable right here. It's the middle cable that goes to the signal in to the volume, and as you can see, it's very loose and it's very long, and it doesn't need to be. So I'm going to try to put it underneath this other cable, and I'm going to turn it over to the switch, and with it being a little bit slacked, which I hope you can see that it is, it's not super tight, it's not pulled like this, I'm not stretching it, I'm having it sort of loose, but not just, you know, not that as loose as it was. And I'm cutting away a piece, and in my case I'm cutting away this much, and it's basically like I'm just taking away a little bit over here and a little bit over there. I'm refining it a little bit there and a little bit there, and together all these little work things that I do will add up in the long run. So I put a little extra solder on the two connections and on my soldering iron, and then I just melt it and put them into each other, and they just flow together, and you have a nice connection. And I tug the wire in like this so that it's not too much in the way. And now we're just going to do the next connection, which is going to be this ground wire here. Again, just the same thing, it doesn't need to be this long. So I'm just going to heat it up, and I'm just going to move it, and I'm going to hold it up to its place. And so I'm going to do the same thing to this white wire here. You can see it's somewhat slack and it doesn't necessarily need cutting because it's pretty long, but we're going to move it around a little bit and see if we can't take at least somewhat off. So it's pulled over this weird black wire here, it doesn't need to be. Pull it in under it, see if we can put it down a little bit neatlier, and fold it up a little bit, and just take off a little bit. And here we have a yellow wire, and it goes all the way around in a big loop, and it definitely can go back a little bit. It doesn't have to be this huge thing, you know. So we're just gonna tug it in under this white one and twist it around it a little bit, because again we want to sort of reduce noise, not introduce noise. Something like that. And then we're gonna, you know, I'm gonna cut this back a little bit, and then tin it again. Yeah, so if you find places where you can twist the wires around each other and make them lie neatly, do that. But in some places you can't do that. You'll have just like this black wire here that we're gonna cut next. You'll just have that be a straight black wire. If I pull this taut, you can see how much more it has than it needs. So if I just pull this back a tiny bit, I know exactly where to cut this. And again, you know, I know that to some of you it might seem like, oh, you're cutting away so little, it's pointless to remove such a tiny bit of wire. And yes, if you're just going to do one wire, it is. But we're going through all of the wires in the entire pickguard. Here is a bunch of wire that we didn't need to have. It's just tiny pieces. So if you look at this now, in just a couple of seconds, no, in a couple of minutes, or for however long I've been sitting here, we've gotten something that looks a lot neater. Just basic cleanup. And I think it looks a lot nicer. And there, you could do more things with it. You could switch out all the wires to go nicer quality. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next step, and just because I am sort of stupid, this is actually the step you should have done before this. I just sort of forgot about it, and then as I was sitting here, I just sort of remembered it, and we're like, oh, I should have already done that. You have a little bit of shielding tape down in the corner here where the electronics go, and they are gonna, you know, protect from interference. But here I have silver tape, and it's just isolation tape. You can buy it in almost any hardware store or electronic store. And it's the first thing we are gonna add to this kit. I said we weren't gonna switch things out, and we are not, but we're gonna add some things, and one of those things is shielding. And so I'm gonna unscrew the screws on this side, and then I'm gonna put a piece of tape like so. And I'm gonna try to line it up with where these pickups go. So I'm gonna take a pen, and I'm just gonna make a tiny little mark approximately on the pickguard where the hole that the wires are being pulled from the connections on the pickups. And by just making tiny little marks like this, I'll be able to line things up. So I'm just taking a screwdriver, and I'm unscrewing the first side where pickups are being held in place. Okay, so with the pickups pulled to the side, I'm just going to take and roughly measure out how much of this tape I need for my first piece. And I'm going from the hole where the neck is going to go to the back of the trim. And I'm pulling this back a tiny bit, just 2 mil or something, and then I'm just making a mark with a knife, like so. And then I just cut it off with a scissor. And then I take that piece and I hold it up to the other piece, and I can see how long that piece needs to be, and I can just cut the next one to the same size. And I put the tape away, and I take one of my pieces and I peel off one corner, and I stick it down roughly where the line that I made out is, and I pull the tape back, and I can put it down. Use the back of my knife to just make sure it gets in correctly. Over here it laps over a little bit, so I'm just going to take the knife, drag it across, remove. And now I'm going to take my knife and press down from over and go around and just cut down. And if you move your knife down like this in the pickguard, you'll get a nice clean cut. And just don't go like this, it's not a saw, just cut down, go back up, continue cutting by going down. And the tape will stay down, and it will cut away super neatly without any problems whatsoever. You can use the back of the knife to burr down the tape so that it has a very nice connection. And then I'll just take the next piece. Wherever I feel like it's sticking out a little bit, I'm just pulling my knife and I'm just cutting. And now I'm not putting a lot of pressure down on anything because the knife is sharp. I don't need to. The same thing goes here. I start in the middle and I pull out, and I go back into the middle and I cut this way. And so now it doesn't cover the edge. And now I can put the pickups back in their place, and we'll move on to the next step. What I have here is the next thing we're going to add to this guitar, and it's these tiny little metal plates, and we're going to stick them to the back of the pickups like this, and it's gonna hopefully help with noise and focus the pickups up a little bit and make things a little bit nicer. And the way I've made these is just I've taken a piece of metal and I've seen if it's magnetic by holding it and see if it sticks, and then I've cut out pieces that are the size of the back magnet. So if you look at this magnet here, you just have to measure how long it is this way and how thick it is this way, and then you can just use those measurements to cut out a tiny piece of metal. This is just shielding, insulation shielding, for when you put on a roof on something like a hen house. So it's nothing special. I just cut them out to the right size, and there they are. And so first thing we're going to do is we're going to put down a little bit of hot glue. And the reason why we're using hot glue for this, because I don't really like hot glue, which you might know if you've seen a bunch of my other videos, but it's a weak glue, which is the reason why I don't like it. But in this instant, it will work to our favor. So we put on a nice even coat. I'm going to do it again. Here it's going to be a little bit tricky because we have the wires in the way, but we put down a nice even coat that covers the pickup, works as an insulator between the metal plate and the actual magnet. We put the magnet in place. It will be held in place by the magnetic force and also the glue, so nothing will move around. So it's all just stuck in place. And by making them the right size, so that they only cover the magnets, we don't have to worry about something like the screws getting in the way or anything. And I'm going to zoom in now so you can get a close-up on the last one and how we do it even more. So pick up hot glue and they're just putting it down, smearing it all over the pickup. You have to work sort of fast because you don't want it to cool down and become too thick. And then just put this down and press it into place. If you get a little glue on you and you burn yourself like I just did, just, you know, man up and go and scream in a corner somewhere where no one can hear you. I don't know, you know. I'm obviously just joking right now. Anyway, so now we'll do it on the neck pickup because it's easier to see. If you look closely, it might be a little bit hard in this video, but you have two solder connections on your pickup on the back here, and one is... the hell is this broken wire here? Okay, I just found a tiny little wire sticking out here, so if this pickup doesn't work, it's because the wire is already broken. Ugh, well, that's so annoying. Anyway, it might just be the end wire that has been pulled through a bunch of times. I'm just going to cut it off like this, and when we go to put the guitar together, if I don't have a neck pickup, it will be because of that wire. Anyway, I'm not going to bother about that right now. You have two connections right here, and one is white and one is black. It could be different colors depending on what kind of pickups you're using, but if you're using this kit, it will be black and white. The white is lead and the black is ground. And we're going to connect with our soldering iron a tiny piece of extra wire to the ground connection. And if you've cut away a bunch of wires like I did, then you'll have some extra wires that you can use. So just push it into place and solder it there. Then pull the wire back over the pickup like this and go a little bit further than middle, so you know where you have to cut it off, like that. And then we're going to strip it back a little bit just to expose some of the bare wire that is hidden in the middle. We're going to pre-tin it, and then we're going to put a bead of solder on this back plate here, and we're going to hold the wire down with our soldering iron tip and heat everything up, and we're going to push in a little bit extra solder, and then we're just going to take our knife and hold the wire down while we move our soldering iron away, and then we're waiting a second and we can remove our soldering iron and been soldered in place. And now I'll just do this the same thing to the next pickup. Here the wire will be flipped to the other side because we're doing the black wire, and so instead of going from this side, it will go from this side. Okay, so here is the pickguard right now, and as you can hopefully see, I have tiny little wires grounding these metal plates to the pickups. Now, I just want to take a moment here to share with you something that I just happened to find, or think of rather, share something with you that I just thought of. And that is, you get this jack that we're going to use later, and it comes with this connection, and it's not a very good connection to have in your guitar once you're done. But since I was a little bit worried about the neck pickup maybe being broken since I saw a little wire sticking out, I could very quickly connect this and go to my amp and plug this in and tap the pickups and see if I got any signal. And so we don't have to wait until I put everything together to find out if something is broken. I can tell you now that everything works the way it's supposed to. It's all nice, it all works. The wire that stuck out was not the lead wire from the pickup, it was just some extra wire hanging off and they hadn't cut it flush. Still think you should cut the wires flush, but it's good to know that things are working the way they should. And that makes me happy. So, let's move on to the next step. Okay, so I've taken the knobs off, and what we're gonna do now is something that has more to do with the feel. I like my knobs to be just a little bit more hard, let's say, to move than I feel like these are. And usually I would have bigger pots, because if you have bigger pots than the ones in this guitar, you will have more movement between number 1 and 2 and 3 and so forth. And that's why tinier pots might sometimes feel like they're cheaper or that they're not as good, because you sort of have that feeling of a lot of movement. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there is anything wrong with them. The size of the pot isn't what makes the quality. It's actually what they're made of. Anyway, you can buy these sort of kits where you get a bunch of these rings, and they're not expensive at all. Like maybe €5 or something. You get all these different kinds of sizes and materials, rings of all sorts of things. And what you just have to do is you take one of your knobs and you find a ring that thing will work for you. And you sort of have to just, go back and forth and sort of see what you like, basically. And you can also do something like maybe put 2 rings down. I am gonna go a little bit more extreme, I think, than I might actually usually do, because this is gonna be a right-handed guitar that is turned into a left-handed guitar, basically. So I'm just gonna put these 2 on and press this on and see how that changed the movement, and I want more of that. So we're gonna see if we can find something else. No, but because it's left-handed, I'm gonna go overboard. See if I can't, make this really hard to move. And it's just because as a left-handed player, I'll have these controls somewhat in the way for me. So if I put 3 rings, maybe 2 tiny one and 1 a bit bigger, maybe. And when I press this on, I have my hand on the other side on the back of the pot, and I squeeze it together, move it, and I don't know, it's just not there yet. But basically, this is what I'm gonna do now. I'll be back when I've done this a couple of times and found what I really want. And I might actually do the tone pots even worse, like really hard to move, just because I want to be not accidentally moving them. Okay, so now I've gone through and I found these 2, and this might actually be a little bit hard to see on the camera, but I hope you can see that these 2 rings, actually you can actually see it. These 2 rings are different sizes. It's kind of harder to see in real life actually, but now looking at the screen I can definitely see it. These are 2 different sizes, and I used 3 on the volume of the bigger size and 3 of the smaller size on the tone pots. And now if I move them, they're really stiff. Now, obviously, as I just told you, this is gonna be played upside down, and so for me, I need it to be a little stiffer than I would actually go. So I might have gone with 2 on each of them otherwise, but I really like the way they move. And I can feel it different, like the volume. I'm gonna be able to do like swells and things with that, because it's like, it rolls neatly. And the tones, I can just do that with. It's a little bit hard actually. And so those are not going to move without me putting my hands on them and actually really going in there. And if this was a left-handed guitar, I wouldn't need that extra. But in this case, I do. So yeah, just put on rings and see what happens, and see what you like, and see like where you want to go with it and how hard you want to make them and things like that. But it does make it feel nicer. So even if you don't go as far as I did, you can make it feel a little bit more high-end, I suppose. And, and it doesn't improve anything except for how it feels, but sometimes we have to just think about how something feels and value that as much as we value some of the other parts. So hopefully you like it. Okay, so we're done with the pickguard, and this is where I'm gonna stop. But first I wanna just add a couple of things to what you can do if you want to go more crazy than I've done. You could take off the magnet on the backside. It's super easy. You just heat up the magnet a little bit with your soldering iron, and then you can just break it off with a plier. And if you do that, you can replace it. You can buy Alnico magnet blocks like these and stick on the back. It's super easy to do. Just remember that usually you have a weak pickup and a strong magnet, and that's why they work. And so if you switch out this bar magnet that are on these sorts of pickups, you're most likely going to weaken the pickup more than strengthen it. I don't really feel like switching out on these sorts of pickups for Alnico is that good of an idea. You can obviously try and see if you like it. You might. It might work really good for you. You can also take out the pull pieces that are on here. It's a little bit more fiddly to do, but it's not that hard. And you can replace them with actual pull pieces that are magnets. I would say that that is better. It will work better for you than the bar magnet. But then again, usually they're compensating the fact that they have a little bit too few winds of wire by putting on a very strong magnet. If you want to make the pickups better, in my opinion, you can buy rare earth magnets that come like this. Tiny little round ones. They look somewhat ridiculous, I know. Don't buy the ones that are the entire length. Just buy the ones that are like maybe half or 1/3, like the ones I hold here. And you can push them in on the back side because they are a little bit too strong, so you will make the pickups a little bit too sharp, in my opinion. You might like it, but I like to compensate that these magnets are even stronger by not having them take up all the space. But you can experiment with it and see. Another thing you can do that maybe you can do together with switching out the magnets, especially if you're going for rare earth magnets, is you can buy super tiny resistor. And these are like so inexpensive that like I don't even know how to convey to you how like you can buy a box of hundreds of these for like maybe, I don't know, €5 or something. It's like they're really inexpensive. And if you buy one of these that is somewhere in the ballpark of 1.5 or 2.3 or, you know, somewhere around there, give or take, you'll have to experiment with this again to find out what you really like. 1.5 or 2.3 mega. You have to have the mega, not the K, not the M on them. And you can just look at your volume pot and where the switch wire, this red one in this case, goes in, you'll attach this to the same leg and the other one to the back of the pickup as a ground. I've told you about this in so many videos. I do this to smooth out pickups all the time. It's one of those old things you see everywhere, and if you have a Silver Sky, you will see this in there. It's one of those things that just, you know, smooths the pickups out a little bit. So yeah, I didn't do it on this pickup now, but that's just, you know, I might add it later. I don't know. Anyway, those are things that I feel like you can do too. And obviously the things I've already said about the switch, but there are some things I feel like you can do. So the pickguard is all done now, and it's ready to go into the guitar. Okay, so when you open the box that the hardware comes in, this is what you'll find. Small plastic bags with the parts in. Here's the bridge, here's the screws and the springs, here are the tuners, the back plate, and the output jack. And basically we're just gonna go through each bag and fix everything up. We're gonna start with the output jack because there's actually really just one thing to do and it's super quick, and so we might as well get it out of the way. Okay, so just open the bag and take out the jack. And it looks really nice at first glance. We have the connection on the back, which we're gonna remove. So we're just gonna take a scissor for now, and we're gonna cut off. And you can cut off a little bit like this so that there is some wire still left on it, so that you know what connection is gonna go where. But this middle thing here, where the hole comes through, is connected to the black one, and that's ground. And as long as you remember that, everything will be okay. We're gonna take out the cable that comes with it. This is a very basic like starter cable, the kind you get when you first start playing guitar. And you can keep this if you want to, it doesn't really matter. I know some of you are probably gonna say, no, this is horrible, you can't use it for anything. But you can at least use it for what we're gonna use it for in this build. So yeah, there is at least one thing. And that is, we're gonna take one of the plugs like this, and we're gonna plug it in and just look at the connection of the output jack and see how it feels in there. It's a little bit wobbly, so I'm gonna take it out and I'm gonna use my thumb on the back like this, just holding it, and I'm gonna press the metal sleeve on top here. I'm gonna press it in towards the middle. Super slowly and with not too much force. I'm not trying to break it off, I'm just gently, very, very gently just bending it forward a little bit. And you might not see that I've done anything, but that's just a tiny bit. You just need to push it a little bit. And then I'm gonna press it in, and now it's a lot tighter. And this is something you can do to all your guitars. If you feel like, oh, they're getting loose, you don't necessarily need to replace the jack immediately. I mean, after doing this that I'm showing you now 10 times, maybe this part will be weakened and break off. But before that happens, you can at least press this back a little bit. And I want to get it to the point where it's a little bit hard to pull out, because you don't want to step on a cable or anything like that. So, and just pull it out and keep pressing it forward and pulling it in. And that's all we're gonna do to the jack. We don't have any like issues otherwise. It's been bent back a little bit, it's a little bit tighter, get a little bit more solid connection. This is one of those parts that you can easily switch out for higher grade, you know, something with nicer quality. But we're not changing anything out on this guitar. So we put this back in the bag and we seal it up, and we can put these cables to the side and use for something else down the line, because we're not gonna need them anymore. And we're just gonna go on to the next bag. Okay, so here is the trem, and we take it out of the bag, or at least try to, and we'll put it back in the bag when we're done with it. And it has some blemishes on the top here. It's not perfect, but it doesn't really matter. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna work on this side here. It's very rough. It's like, I can actually use this as a file. You've already seen me do that, but just to show you again, here is a stick, and I'll just move it across here a couple of times. And as you maybe can see, actually you can't see because I wasn't in frame, I can sand it down. And I don't know if you can see this on the stick. I wasn't really even putting that much force into this. You can see how the top has been all sanded down. So it could actually be a nice file. You could actually cut this part off and have a tiny little file. So I mean, it would actually be a nice file, because it has a very random pattern, so you don't get that many scratch marks. But we're gonna put this on the guitar, and so I'm gonna take and I'm gonna remove this, and it's gonna be super quick. I'm just gonna show you how I do it, and then we'll move on to the next thing we need to fix on this. Okay, so here I have my belt sander, and all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold this up to this and move it across to sand this down. And I'm just gonna go so far that these sharp edges here disappear. So it will only take a couple of seconds to do. I don't know if you can see that it's basically all gone. There's still a little left, but there is no sharpness to it. Okay, so you'll get this kit with the guitar, and in it you'll find one of these little wrenches that you're supposed to use to adjust the saddles. And I've taken one of those and I've put a little hand on it. Just in case you're curious what I'm using. It's just because I think this is a nicer tool for this particular work. If I move these, they move really, really easy. And you don't want that. You want them to be hard to move. Like, this is too much. It's too much. If I set up the guitar with them this easy to move and this easy to lose, the vibration of playing the guitar for a couple of hours will change the height of the strings a lot. Because it's just like, these are too easy to move. I'm putting no force in this at all. I'm barely doing anything and I can just unscrew these like nothing. And so if I was to maybe play a gig, you know, if I ever get to do that again in my life, I wouldn't be able to play this guitar with this trim the way it is right now on stage, because a couple of songs in, these would start falling out. Like, it's just too many vibrations. That's basically what you have to think about when you're building guitars. You know, like you want to create vibration, but you want to work against vibrations to make sure everything is super solid and can't move. And you know, that's something you have to deal with inexpensive guitars. I'm gonna take all of these out, and then we're gonna move on to the next part. You just unscrew them like this. You see, I can use my hand for this. Okay, so we've taken them all out. I've put one back in, as you might be able to see. And yeah, the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take one of these and put it on our tool, like so. So we have it ready. And then we're gonna take some plumber's tape. Now, this is super thin and it's used to isolate plumbing so that water in your pipes won't move around. And we're just gonna super gently, we're gonna wrap around it, and we're just gonna take one pass because we're not gonna need more than this. And then we're just gonna squeeze it tightly around, and we're gonna cut off the excess like so, and just roll it between our fingers a little bit, and now it looks all white. And then we can screw it back into place, and you'll feel immediately how much nicer and tighter this is. And so it won't move, like that. Now you get a little bit of white stuff off here, but we can go back in with a knife and we can cut around and peel it back and just clean it up and make it look neat. And if you have the opportunity, you can use, I have an even better version of this, but I can't find it any longer and I've run out of it. There is this thing that you can buy, it's for your car, and it's called Anti-Glide, and it looks sort of like a glue gelatin thing, and you can just dip them in that and then screw them in and then leave them to somewhat dry, because it doesn't really ever dry, but it hardens up a little bit and it will have the same effect and it will be easier to clean up. This is a little bit fiddly to get to look nice, but it will work in a pinch, as I hope you can see. It's super hard to show when you guys can't feel the motion, but it's like it's much nicer now. And a roll of this stuff is like, I don't know, 2-3 euros, I don't know, something like that. It's not expensive at least, and you can use it for a lot of things, like for example actual plumbing. So I'm on the last one now, and I'm just gonna show you again, just to be extra sure that you understand. So I put it on the tool and I just basically roll it to wrap it in the plastic, like so. And then I cut it off and I finish the roll. And sometimes you need one layer and sometimes you need more. I have some of these that I actually needed to roll around 3 times just because they're pretty loose. And yeah. I also just want to take the time to say that this is when they are sloppily fitted together, but they do fit together. There are some of these where they've been stripped or damaged, and the best thing to do is replace them. I would probably have replaced these as well if it wasn't a challenge to actually not replace them. There are higher quality, more well-made saddles that you can find and bridges that you can find, and so, you know, that's always an option. But using plumber's tape, or if you can find anti-glide, are really good options. So yeah, get yourself some of this, and it lasts a really long time, especially if you're only using it for like guitar building, because you don't need it that often. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next part, which is this thing here. So we need to open it up and take it out. And if you want to keep this, you can do so. Here is the plate. It's a little bit smudged because I just put my fingerprints all over it. Can you see me in the reflection? There I am. Anyway, if we look closely at these holes here, you can see that there are sharp burrs inside of them. And the screws that comes with to hold the neck in place are not that high quality, so you can actually, like, by screwing them in, sort of damage them. So we're just going to clean those holes up super fast. I'm going to use this step bit, and I'm just going to put it in my drill, and then I'm just from the back going to slowly clean them up like that. Just pass them through enough to clean them up. So I don't know if you can see that the burrs are in there, in that hole, but if I flip it around, you can see these holes, and they're nice and neat and clean, and there are no sharp edges. And it takes a couple of seconds to do this, so it's time to talk about the tuners. Here we have a Charler tuner, and it's very sturdy and well made. Now, these are obviously more expensive tuners. Some of them are probably even more expensive than the entire kit. But if I wiggle this, there is no give. And if I shake it, and close to the microphone, there is no sound at all if I shake it. If I take this one, I can move this. I feel that there is some give, and if I shake it, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's just a lot of give in these. Now, obviously, I know that you know, and we all know, and everyone knows, that obviously nicer tuners is always better, and high quality is better than low quality, so there's no argument there. But we can upgrade these by going through them and making them a little bit better. We maybe can't get them to this level of quality unless we're super lucky and everything in here is just loose and they're actually awesome. But most likely we're not going to get rid of everything. So, but we can make them from maybe being a level 2 to maybe a level, I don't know, let's say 7. If these are like level 9 or 10. So, I'm going to show you how to take these apart. First thing is on the top we have a little screw here. You just have to put in a screwdriver, some pressure, and unscrew it. And take out the screw and put it to the side where you won't lose it, and then pull off the knob and put that to the side, and then you'll have two washers, and they are just there to make sure that metal doesn't scrape against metal. So we're going to take these off and put them on the side, the white one closest to the body and then the black on top. And now, as you hopefully can see, I can press this to the underside, so it's basically loose. You can pull it out. You might need to wiggle it a little bit to get it out, but there it is. And now we're going to take this back plate here off. You put this on the side, and you can see in through the hole here the back plate here, and so you can come in with basically anything, and you can pop it off like so. It might have been a little bit hard to see what I did there because it's kind of hard to film while you're doing this, but just go in from the side and pop it out like that. And you put this to the side. They are pressed fit, so you're going to press it back in place afterwards. So if your tuners are super loose, you need to tighten all the screws. But if it's stuck and you feel like it needs lubrication, then you just pour it in here. You don't need to take it all apart. What we're gonna do is we're gonna tighten this up, and we're gonna tighten it more than it was before, because as you can see, it's very loose. So yeah, we're gonna see if we can't, work out something that is maybe a little bit tighter by just, basically screwing this down as hard as we can. And if I move the screw now, most likely you'll see how the tuner moves as well. And my hand isn't in frame, god damn it. And so we need to just really hold on to it, and I like to use something like a metal stick like this so that I can poke it through the hole and basically lock everything in place, and then tighten everything down. Obviously this is loose because we haven't tightened that part down, but if I press it in place and I wiggle this, hopefully you can hear that it's there's still a little bit, but it's not as bad, and it's gonna get better. Now you could put in some oil if you wanted to. You don't have to. You can still put in oil that way, or you could put in some anti-glide on the screws. So I'm just gonna press this into place like so, and if you have a piece of wood or a piece of plastic that we got with the kit, you can press it up against it to just make sure we really get a nice seal again. And as long as you haven't tried to, I've seen this before, and this is why I'm telling you, don't do this. I've seen people come in with a knife and try to bend it up like this and pry it up. And the thing is, this thing has a very tiny little lip that it's squeezed into, and it's held on by friction. So if you just put it on place and you press it down towards something like I'm doing right now, it will work. And if you need to take them out, you have to take this whole thing out first so you can get in from the underside. And just do that way, because I promise you you'll have a better time with your tuners if you do it that way, because as soon as you start getting weird crazy little lips cracks or bent up pieces here, you'll never get them to really stick on, and you'll have to like glue them on or tape them on or something, you know. And at that point, like, you'll just, you know, you're gonna have to replace them. Like, that's what I see. We put on the white ring, and then we put on the black ring, then the tuning peg, like so, and then we take our screw again and we put it back in its place. And first we just hand tighten it so that we make sure that it gets in where it's supposed to go. And then we take our screwdriver and we just screw it in, and we'll get to that point where it starts to get hard to turn, and we'll just keep on turning, and we'll press the screwdriver in, because you really don't want to slip with the screwdriver, you know, something like this, because then if that happens, you'll strip the screw. And you know, these tuners are made of softer materials, so it's easier to break them. And now if I turn this key again, it's much tighter and it feels much stronger. And if I shake this, I hope you can hear, I can still hear some of it, but there's just a lot less. And if you see here, you can see how much it's sunk in, hopefully. It's like 2 mil or something, and it's just because it's so much tighter. And so, if you have tuners that you think you're gonna have to replace because they're so loose, and they look like this is how you take care of them. I did a video where I showed you all tuner shapes and how you oil them, but if you feel like you need to know how to take them apart, you know, just leave a comment saying that you want to see that, because it's not that hard to figure out. And I have like a bucket right here actually of a bunch of weird crazy tuners, and I could definitely take them all apart. But for example, if you take one of these tuners, again, like you have the same basic shape, they take them apart basically the same way. There's no real difference. I'm gonna stop recording now and just do this to all the other tuners. Just make sure they're all perfect and that they feel solid and strong. And I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so the next part that we're gonna take care of is the claw. Now, the thing is, and this goes for all claws, it's not just like inexpensive guitars. This is something I do to all my claws. If you look at them, they usually have a little tap in the middle like this. And you're supposed to pinch the ground wire under this. I see a lot of guitars where they just solder it to the top, or where they've like not even bothered with it. The worst part is when someone is ground to one of these, but you shouldn't do that, because that's where the springs are going. And you need clearance for those, so don't do that. But the thing is, sometimes I look at guitars and the connection here is broken, and even though, you know, a cable is soldered to it, it's not actually really connected. And so, what I do to fix that is I take a piece of sandpaper and I cut a tiny bit that is long like this out. It doesn't have to be exactly this shape, just something that is a long sleeve basically, or whatever you want to call it. And it doesn't really matter what grid you use. This is 240, but you know, it doesn't really matter that much. And I just put it in like a roll up like this, and I put it in to the sleeve like that, and I pull it away like so, and I put it in like so, and I pull it away, and I go back and forth, and I do this just a couple of times. So I just have no luck today, except I actually just read a lovely comment that I got, so thanks for that. It makes me so happy when I get comments, because, well, at least when I get nice comments, but because, you know, I don't have that many subscribers, but, you know, the ones that seem to watch my videos and rewatch them, they really seem to like them, and that makes me happy. So after a couple of minutes, and I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but if you look into that little hole, not this hole obviously, but that in the middle here, hopefully you can see there is a bunch of, that it isn't that nice looking, and that it's all roughed up. Hopefully, I don't know if you can see it. But anyway, that's what you want, and it's just because you want a really nice solid connection. And it's for later when we actually go to put in the ground. The rest of it looks still neat and nice, and we didn't sand the top or anything. And you're just supposed to put in the ground wire, and then, you know, the best thing would be if you took pliers and you just press this back together so that it really got a solid, nice, pinched up connection. And when we go to the assembly, I'm going to show you, and hopefully you'll see it. And yeah, so let's go on to the next part. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you something that I don't necessarily know if it matters. I know someone is going to ask me if I really do believe that this matters, and I don't know. I just don't. I think the details are important. That's the thing. One of the reasons why I build guitars is because I feel like I can spend a lot of time fixating on the small things that maybe companies don't. And maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna spring the springs. I don't know what to call it. I have here a tool that I've never shown you in any of my guitar builders life hacks, and it's because it's fairly new tool. I haven't had this thing going on for that many years. It's just a piece of wood and another piece of wood that creates this little lip and a bunch of holes drilled so that I can push in these springs into the holes, basically like this. And I'm just going to put these 3 in it now. And I make a mark. And then I release it. And I put a screw in. So we're going to do it the other way around. Now that it is in, I can hold it up and pull it to the hole. And press it in, and it's neatly in place, and it's being pulled at. And it's just that I feel like when I hold these, they just feel very stiff and unworkable, I suppose is maybe a word you could use, in a way that I just don't know if I like it. So I feel like the springs are supposed to be a little looser, but I just feel like there are guitars that have springs that are nicer, and I have to ask myself why that is. Why does it feel nicer to pull on them? And it's not just about, it can be about the springs as well. So something like that, and I'll let it sit like that for a couple hours, and then I'll feel them, and you know, if I feel like they're become a little bit softer, I can tug on them like this, you know, and just work them a little bit. And if I feel like they've, you know, feel a little bit easier to spring, I'll keep them. And if I don't feel it, I'll just move them back a little bit more and drag them out a little bit more. But be careful, because there is definitely a point where you will destroy them. The springs on the back of the claw is not made to always be taut. That's why I always tell people to block the trem off and not just tighten the springs all the way back. Because, yeah, they're supposed to be there to just react in a burst and not be used, you know, to always be under pressure. But, yeah, I'll just clamp them like this, and I'll move them around like this for a bit. And I'll leave them for a couple of hours, and I'll come back and I'll move them and I'll take them off and see what happens. And I feel like they loosen up a little bit, and I feel like maybe it helps the trem. Again, this is one of those things that I do, so I'm showing it, but I don't know. You do what you want with the information. I have here the neck, which is what we're gonna work on today. I've already cut out the headstock shape, and if you know anything about Jimi Hendrix, which you most likely do, you probably know more than I do, since you're watching these videos, I'm just the guy making them. You know that his headstock does not look like this because he has the bigger shaped headstock because he's was a 70s Strat, I think. Anyway, I don't really like that headstock shape, so if you're wondering why I don't have that, it's because I just prefer the other shape, a little bit more subtle classic shape that, you know, doesn't take up too much attention. I've done some things to this, obviously, as you can see, beforehand, just because I feel like there are some things we don't need to go through. And one thing that I've done is I've reshaped the headstock, as I've just said. I've also taped off the fretboard, and I've leveled and I've crowned the frets. I haven't polished them yet because I have a different way of polishing the frets than other people. It's not that much different, but I see a lot of videos of people polishing their frets, and I feel like, why are you doing it like that when you could do it this way, which is much easier and faster and better? So I'm going to show you that. But if you hang around on YouTube watching videos of people building guitars, you most likely know how to like level frets and things like that, or at least you've seen people do it. You make the neck as straight as possible with a notched stride edge, and you put some paint, you color in the frets basically, and then you just sand the frets down with a file or with a sanding beam, and when the paint is gone, the marker paint is all gone, they're all leveled, and then you can crown them and things like that. You've probably seen that 100 times. I've done videos doing it. Everyone and their mothers have made videos where they level their frets, so I don't feel like you necessarily need to see me do that in this video. Anyway, I'm rambling, I'm sorry. What we're gonna do now is we are gonna reshape this neck. I dislike this shape right here. I don't know why they come like that, but other than that, I feel like this neck is really nice, and you don't really have to, but I want to show you how to do it. And I also feel like I kind of want this neck a little bit slimmer. Obviously you have to be careful so you don't take off too much. It goes kind of slowly, so you'll have time to check and see if the neck is getting too thin. So let's just get this started. I feel like I'm talking too much and I'm rambling. I don't really know what I'm saying or what I'm doing, so, you know, we'll talk in the end when I've figured out what I did. Okay, so if you look at the neck, we'll start off with this notch here, and it's just a weird shape. It goes out too much. I like it when it's more rounded over, so I'm just gonna take a pen and I'm just gonna sort of fill in the area that I want to remove and reshape, something like that. Yeah, I think that we'll start off slowly and just go deeper and deeper and deeper until we're satisfied. And now I'm just gonna take the neck like this, and I hope you can see what I'm doing and that I'm not too much out of frames. And I'm just gonna take a knife and I'm just gonna carve away, and I'm gonna start off by taking off maybe a mil or maybe 2, depending on what it looks like, but I'm basically just removing the black paint because I know those are the areas that need to go. So I'm just taking my knife and I'm just cutting away like this. And I feel like I'm making these videos too long, and I don't know if it's because I'm rambling or if it's because I want to really show everything, but I'm just gonna do this for now, and you don't have to be 100% perfect. It just needs to be 99.9% what you want. But don't focus too much on like the finish, just focus on the reshaping for now. And so I'm gonna spend a little time doing this, and I'll be back real soon. Okay, so as you can see, I've reshaped it now, and I just took a knife and I carved it down, made it as even and smooth as I could with a knife. And it's not perfect yet, but I haven't sanded it. I also used a scraper, just because you can get in there and, you know, move some of those lines that you can easily get with a knife. And I just basically just recarved this. And it's just because I like a more even transition from the neck into the body. So, let's move on to the next step. Okay, so we're outside now because it's a beautiful sunny day, and we're gonna reshape the neck, the back side here. I have it clamped to my sawhorse, and I have here a tool from one of my guitar builder's life hacks, which is basically just 2 pieces of dowel, 2 pieces of sandpaper, and now I can just move it like this. And depending on how much flex I have, the different way the shaping will be. And so I'm going to go back and forth, taking some off, and then I'm going to sand this smooth with higher and higher and higher grit. This on this is 80, so I'm going to start off with 80 and then come back once I've reached 400. So I'm just going to go back and forth basically like this, and the more down like this I have, the more of a cup or whatever you want to call it shape I get, and the more out like this I have it, the more flattened it will be. And so I'm going to be able to take off, and I'm going to try to take off as little as possible because I really don't want to, you know, mess something up. You can look up online what kind of truss rod you have inside of the neck, and you can go and measure one of those. Most likely this is about a 9mm thick one, which means that I will be able to take off maybe 1/3, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take that much off. Okay, so after sanding the neck, I have sprayed it with some clear lacquer just to give it some nice amber yellowish tone to it. I like that color, and I like the way it looks together with the rest of the guitar, which you're obviously not going to see in this video. But now we're just going to leave it to dry, and then I'm probably going to sand it and clear coat it again, and I'll be back real soon. Okay, so it's the next day, and I have the neck here. It's been left to dry, and it's all good. It looks about how I wanted it to. And now we are going to fix the back of the neck, this area here where your hand will be moving. Some of you might know that if you have a lacquer neck and you sweat a lot, moving it up and down like this might feel kind of sticky and weird and make the neck feel sort of like you get stuck while playing it. And a way you can fix that is by sanding the neck and make it feel more like a satin finish, and so your hand will glide faster. Now you can do this with steel wool and just go back and forth a lot, or you can do it with sandpaper and, you know, move up in grade. There's probably other ways you can do this as well. I haven't tried everything. I am gonna go with sandpaper because I feel that is the best way, and we're gonna go a little bit crazy, and I'll show you how I make it feel even better than most necks when you just, you know, scuff up the lacquer to make it sort of satin. But first off, we're gonna sand the neck, and we're gonna start off at 400 and just take the neck like this and move it back and forth like this. And I'm gonna go up to 1200. So I'm gonna start off here and just go from one to another, and I'll be back in a second or two when I've done this, because you obviously don't need to see me sit like this for half an hour going from one grid to another. And this is maybe one of those things where you're like, whoa, you said half an hour? but it's not that long. It's just, you know, I have to go through all the grits and get a really nice, even. And if you're doing this to a guitar that you bought, this one has a really thin coat, so I've already basically sanded through it. I don't know if you can see that, but the neck is almost already done, just sitting here. But if you have a clear coated, you know, bought guitar that you're doing this to, you don't have to sand through all the layers of lacquer. It's not necessary at all. I'm just mostly, you know, probably gonna do that because I've already sanded through the layers. But I only have 2 layers, a colored layer and a clear coat with no color in it. I mean, the color in is just because I kind of like yellowy sort of vintage style tint to it. So I'll be back real soon. Now I've sanded the neck back, and I forgot to say this, but maybe you understood this, but I'm saying it anyway. The guitar kit neck came with some sort of finish on it. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but I sanded that. I removed all of it. I sanded it away. And that's just because I replaced the finish with this finish that I have on the neck now. And you don't have to do that. You can definitely keep the finish. Obviously, if you're reshaping the back of the neck, it might be hard to match up the old finish with something new, especially if you don't really know what the finish is. I haven't really looked it up, so maybe it says on Thomann's homepage what kind of finish they used. The other thing I've done is I've also, which I don't know if you can see it yet because it hasn't really dried, but I've put something that I call liquid rust on it. And it's just, you take old rusted screws and you put them in vinegar and you let them dissolve. I know some people say you should put steel wool in vinegar and wait for it to rust, but the thing is, that will take a couple of days. If you have already rusty nails in the vinegar, it will like liquefy itself in a couple of hours only. So I just feel like it's faster because you don't have to wait for something to start rusting. You can just take something that's already rusting. And the way I do with this is that I have a little bottle like this where I always keep a little bit of the solution. So I always save a little bit of it, and I can refill it and I can make more, but I can also have this as a starter to make more. So if I, for example, feel like, oh, I'm running out and I only have this much left, I can put this into a bigger container and fill up with more vinegar, and I can keep that as a starter to make more. And so it will go faster to always make more. And I don't really know, this is one of those things where I don't know if it's a placebo effect or if it actually has some sort of merit to it, but I feel like, and this might just be, you know, because I love relic guitars and I like old guitars and I like the way they look. So please, you know, take this with a grain of salt. I'm not trying to like force my ideas on people. I'm just telling you what I'm experienced, so please keep that in mind. But I feel like when I sand back a guitar neck and make it all awesome, I usually wet the neck a little bit, just dampen it a small amount, and then I continue sanding it, and that's because the grains will rise and you can level them and you'll get an even nicer sanding. But I feel like when I do that with the vinegar, especially like this one, it just feels like it becomes even better. I don't know why, but it's like some sort of, I don't know. Every guitar neck that I've done that to, I feel like they've become better necks than if I haven't done it. So I don't know if there is a chemical reaction vinegar has that is rising the grain of the wood up more than what water will or something. But it's just an experience I've had, and I've done this to a lot of guitars. I've probably done this to maybe somewhere around 20-25 guitars as of recording this. And I feel like that's something that has improved all of those guitars necks. I can't think of any guitar that I've done this to where I haven't felt that. So yeah, it also looks cool. I don't know. But I'm gonna leave this to dry now for a bit, and I'll be back in half an hour or something, I don't know. So yeah. Okay, so I'm back, and I've sanded the neck and dried it, and everything is nice and awesome. And it's up to 1200 grit sandpaper. Yeah, sanded up to 1200 grit. Everything feels really nice and smooth. You know, I can go super fast. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, the thing is, It feels really nice and smooth. Amazing feeling neck right now. You could definitely stop here, but I have a sort of little extra thing that I do just to make the neck a little bit nicer. And this I feel like have worked on a lot of things. You don't necessarily need to do this just on a neck like this one. I've tried it on a couple of other necks, clear coated necks and satin finished glossy necks, you name it. We're gonna use teak oil, which I have a can of here. You could most likely use True Oil or Crimson Guitars oil. They just come in smaller tins, so I don't think they're worth the money. And also I haven't tried it with them. I've only tried it with this, and I don't feel like showing you something that I don't know anything about. So we're gonna go with teak oil. We have a small tiny bit of 1200 grit sandpaper, and we're just taking the teak oil and we're putting some on the sandpaper, and we take the neck and we sand. We go pretty fast, and you'll feel that the neck becomes really warm. You can almost burn yourself on the sandpaper. So yeah, you'll feel it. Take a little bit more and sand the neck real fast and real hard. Press down. You're basically burnishing the neck with the teak oil, and then you put it to the side. Take a piece of leather, regular scrap leather from when you've been building your bow and arrow for Legolas for example, and you're just holding this up, and we're taking the inner part and we're just burnishing it. Basically, you're just moving the scrap leather up and down like this, and trying to get a little bit of heat going, something like that. You can feel the neck. It feels amazing. It really looks amazing. You obviously don't need to, relic it. I have a little bit more on this side than that side, but that's just because I want a feeling of it being a little bit natural and uneven. And now just leave the neck a little bit to dry, and to basically settle in. You can feel the neck a little bit. You obviously, if you feel the neck now, you won't even notice that there is any like oil or anything on it. So yeah, and it's all really good. These are the sort of things that I feel like you'll find on more expensive guitars. The teak oil is, I don't even know if there's any really on the neck, or if it is, it's like being pushed into the grain, a lot. So yeah, I don't know if you can like hear this. I'm trying to find a way to like convey how smooth this neck is. It's like silk, or even finer than that. It's like, I don't know, like a baby cheek or something. I don't know. I'm rambling right now, I'm sorry. I'm gonna stop recording before I make a fool of myself, and I'll be back when we go to the frets. As I've already said, I've leveled the frets and I've polished them and everything. No, I haven't polished them. I've leveled the frets and I've crowned them and made everything perfect. And now we're going to the polish part. As I've already said, I never showed you those parts because I feel like there's so many videos and I've already made my own videos, and it's just, don't really need to see more of that. And I want to make the video as short as possible while still, teaching something and making the video worth something. Okay, so a lot of people will polish the frets with a Dremel, and they'll have a small little buffer wheel, and they'll go, over one fret and then the next one, and you can definitely go that way. There's nothing wrong, but it's a more time-consuming and a more expensive way to do things than the way I do it now, and I feel like my way is faster and gives me better results. I've done it that way before. When I started building guitars, I did the polishing by hand, and then I went over to using a Dremel, and then I went over to having a buffer wheel. These are super cheap. You just put them in your drill, you get a little bit of buffing compound, you just start spinning it, and you press it into. The wheel gets a little bit, it gets colored, so it's now bluish, which I hope you can see. And then I just take the neck and I just press it in, and I go along like this. And I just go like that until the frets are nice and polished. And so all I need is a little bit of pressure and a little bit of masking tape. And I hope you can see now. I'm gonna try to show you. that the first fret has been polished and the second fret hasn't. And hopefully you can see that the first one is super nice and shiny and the rest aren't. So let's just... And you can take your piece of leather and you can just move it across if you wanna, and they will get a little bit warm going and you'll get a little bit more polish going. And I really hope you can see now. It's kind of hard to show the difference, and I suppose this is one of those times you're just gonna have to believe me, because I feel like I'm not able to really show you how big of a difference there is. Okay, so as you can see, I hope at least, the frets are really nice and shiny, and the strings are just gonna glide over these. They're super smooth and polished. Anyway, next thing to do is to remove the masking tape, and you'll see how amazing it all looks. So let's just get a sneak preview of the fretboard without the masking tape on. Okay, so here it is, and I think that looks really nice. I really like this piece of Purple Heart, especially up here by the first fret. I don't know if the camera is able to pick up the nice bit of purple that is in here, going together with the brown and then into this darker part here. But that movement is really nice. Anyway, now a very important step is cleaning your hands, because as you can see, I got a little bit of dirty and I don't want to touch the fretboard really with those dirty fingers. This finger is a little bit clean so I can touch it. But anyway, I'll be back real soon and we'll put some guitar oil on the fretboard. Okay, so here's the neck now, and it looks good, I think. It's nice and even and straight, and the frets are awesome. They're super high polished and they look really nice. Yes, that I've put shielding tape in the cavity, and it's super simple to do. You just cut out pieces of aluminum tape and you line the inside and you make it flush and you cut it to size, push it down into the cavity and make it look neat. And you have, like you can see on the body, a little bit of overhang like I have right here, so that when the pickguard goes on, you get a connection between the pickguard tinfoil and the body tinfoil, so that things meet up, so that you can get a connection all around. There isn't that much more to it. You need to use a multimeter to make sure you have connection all around. Press it down in different places and you hear a beep. And that's basically all there is to it. You have to obviously shield the entire cavity and the little plug-in cavity or jack. And now we are gonna put the pickguard in place and the neck in place and the bridge in place, and sort of just get this guitar to where we can play it and do the setup and those things. So, without talking too much more, because I always feel like I'm rambling too much and making these videos about 10 or 15 minutes longer than they need to be. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Anyway, let's get going I have a lot to do, so yeah. Whew! Okay, so here's the guitar body, and I have my coffee and cookies, so I am ready to start building the guitar now. Here's the pickguard. I like to start with the pickguard because the body and all the parts on it are very easy to control when it's just this tiny little piece of it. Once you get, you know, a neck on it and things, it starts to become a little bit clumsy. So we're just gonna get these things going first. So I'll put pickguard down here, and I'll take this little part here, the little connector that lets you not solder, and I'm just gonna cut that off because we're never gonna use it. And I'll pull the ground wire that is going to go to the clock away, and I'll start twisting these two wires together just so that they are out of the way for now. And when we've twisted them like this, I'm just going to take a little bit of masking tape, and it doesn't have to be much at all. I'm just going to take it and pull these together and secure them together with a little bit of masking, and it's just so that they don't fray out from each other, get loose. I want to put the pickguard to the side like this, the body, and I want to pull this wire down into that hole, and I want to put this two strings through the little hole on the side so that we can later put the pickguard down like this and screw everything in down into its right place and things like that. But first we need to put this on. It's the soldering iron I use, and we're gonna use it, so we need to start it up right now, like so. Okay. So, I have the pickguard here. I'll flip it over and I'll just add a tiny little ground wire. It doesn't have to be super long, but somewhere around this length. And we're just gonna put a little bit of solder on our soldering iron, and we're just gonna attach it to somewhere where a bunch of other ground connections are. So, and then we're just gonna flip it over like this and see sort of where this could be, and move it to the side. I hope you can see what I'm doing. No, you can't. I'll flip it over to the other side. I'll flip it over like this, maybe. There it is. A little bit confusing with all the ground wires everywhere. Now this is already pre-tinned, and now I can hold it in place up to like a place like that. And I'm gonna take a little nail. This is one of those that you use when you make furniture. They're not hard at all to find. And I'm just gonna poke it into the wood and take a hammer and basically use it to pinch the ground wire that we just attached into the wood. And after I've pushed this in and I've made sure it has a nice connection, I'm gonna take my multimeter, I'm gonna put it to continuity just like always, and I'm just gonna see if I get a connection to it and to the ground wire. And as you hopefully can hear, everything is connected. Now, just to be on the safe side, I am gonna melt a tiny bit of solder into where the nail and the wire is being pinched towards the shielding tape. Just to melt all of those 3 points together. Something like that. Now, because it's kind of hard to measure out exactly the distance between things, and if anything is gonna be touching, and everything is kind of confusing, and the little nail is in this cavity right here, I'm going to take some electrical tape. I don't want to create a ground circle where everything is weird, so I'm taking this tape and I'm just putting a piece of it down over where that is, because I don't want to accidentally bump up against the back of the pot. That might become an issue. It's not certain that it will, but if we put a little bit of the tape there, we'll stay on the safe side. I would also do this in places like the cavities here, if I thought the back of the pots would hit up against it, but I'm pretty sure these aren't that shallow. I don't think we have to worry about that. So now I can just feed the wires through these holes. The ground wires go through this hole here so that they can go to the jack, and this ground wire here goes through the little hole that is in the body, and I just have to try to match up the pickguard with the body so that it will lie flush. And there's always something that is, you know, lying a little bit weird, and so you might have to stick your fingers in like this to try to find the right way for it to fall into place. Okay, so after the pickguard is in its place, you can start screwing in the screws, and you just take one screw at a time. Keep in mind 2 things though. First thing is, you can't rely on these holes being in the right place. most of these were not, and most likely you're gonna have the same experience as I did, but that's okay. You can just plug them up and re-drill them, but you should probably test things and make sure things line up nicely. And second of all, if you are unsure about the work you've done on these pickups and the rewiring we did, and you haven't tested them to see if things works the way they're supposed to, then, you know, maybe only put in like 2 or maybe 4 screws or something, like one in each corner. Just because, you know, it's gonna be easier to take those screws out if there are only 4 of them, basically. So now we can flip this over and around like this. And I'm gonna put something on this side just to hold this up a little bit at an angle so I can see it. From the back here we have the claw, the ground wire to the claw, and I was gonna show you how I connect it. But first we have to sort of estimate how much of the wire we're gonna need. Put it through the little hole there, if you have a little hole there. You can see what I mean. Little hole, you can poke it through like that. And I think the claw will sit somewhere around here, so it will bend back like that. And we'll give ourselves a little bit extra there. Take a knife and we can cut it off. There is no real reason in having longer ground connections than what is necessary. It will only potentially introduce noise, which is what we don't want. And so now I'm just going to pre-tin this wire here, and I'm going to move it up in to the side of the claw. You hold the claw like this, and you take the wire and you basically push it in under the claw. I work the cable in under this claw here, bend it up a little bit with a knife just to make it easier for me, if you can see it or if my fingers are in the way, but I'm basically just crossing it under, trying to get it in there. This is not as hard to do when you don't film, so if it looks like I'm struggling, you're not going to struggle if you're not filming. And then just pinch it down a little bit just to get a solid connection, but also to hold the wire in place so it doesn't move. You don't want to break it. Bend it in, have a little bit of slack, and then we're just gonna go from the back and we're just gonna hold, I don't know if you can see the little wire there. We're just gonna hold the soldering iron in place and flood in some solder into it. And because, if you remember from the video where we fixed the hardware, if you remember, we scuffed it up so it will have a nice solid connection. Something like that. Now we can just push the wire back in like this and move this across like that. And now we can take our screws and we can just line them up with the holes and put them in. And there is no real sense in tightening these down right now. We're just gonna put them in with our fingers so that they line up with the hole and that everything looks sort of okay. And take our screwdriver and just put them in a little bit so that they don't fall out when we flip the guitar over. Something like that. We're gonna leave it for now. So we open the bag and we take out the plate and the jack, and we're just gonna attach these. So let's zoom in there. So let's start off by just looking at the jack here. Now if you remember, I told you could just cut these wires off and you would see where they fit. And if you did, you can just attach them. You don't really need to go overboard, but I want to just explain that the inner circle here that you can see in metal, that's where the sleeve, the long part cable, will touch up. That's the ground. You basically just need to know that, because if that's the ground, then the opposite one, because they're just 2 connections, if one is ground, the other must be the lead, right? And we have them here. And most of the time, not always, but most of the time, ground will be a black wire. So we put this to the side here, and we can pull these over here, and we can see, because I like to be able to put my jack to the side. I always want the cables as short as possible, but I also like them to be, you know, long enough for me to be able to work. You could make it so that this sits here, and you solder them in place here by sneaking in here. I'm doing it very tightly. But I like to be able to just move this to the side. So we're going to cut these cables off somewhere around here, like that. And then we're gonna hold them back like this, and we're just gonna strip back the plastic cover, and then we're gonna pre-tin them. And I'm just gonna twist them around a little bit more, just because I can, like this. And now I'm gonna just on-solder this little cable here and put on some solder on my soldering iron and reattach the wires back where they came from. And my hand is in the way so you can't see what I did. Hopefully you'll see it better on this one. Damn, it's hard. I need to get smaller hands. Heat it up, pull it out, take the black wire, which I hope you can see that I have here, add a little bit more solder, hold them in place, just super fiddly. I hope you can see what I'm doing. No, you can't. Damn it. And now they are connected. And now we can just take this, push it in to the cavity and line it up, something like that. Now we can just screw them in place. Okay, so we put the trem in so, and we take the first screw up here and we put it in place and we start screwing it down, just like so. Just enough for it to sort of be in place. And then we take the last one and we screw that one down. And just screw it down a little bit. And then we look from top and the holes are somewhat aligned, but not perfect. So if mine are off by very little, so I think I'm gonna be okay. But if yours are more out of whack, you have to basically just fill them up, and you can use this as a gauge for where you have to put in the new holes. Okay, so you put in the screws and you press it with one hand flat against the body, and then you tighten the screws until the underside of the screw, the hat here, sort of, you say so, the underside where it bends up like this, you tighten them until that is touching, but it's not enough to force the trem into bending forward. So as you hopefully can see, they are all starting to touch this, but they are not forcing the trem forward, so it lies flat against the body. Okay, so now we're just gonna put these in, and I take the first one and I pull it in there, and you should be able just tuck them in like that. And I like to put them in like this for an even spring sort of tension, but this trem that you get with this is super thin. It's not a very high quality, and I know some of you are going to say you can use it, and the thing is, maybe you can get it to a place where someone who is a beginner that isn't that used to using a trem is okay with it, but I think we should try to build this guitar as nice as possible. So we're going to take these two springs out and we're going to move them over one from the middle to the outer one so that we get a more even tension like this. I feel like this is a better tension for when you're not gonna use the trem. So now we can move this trem back to where the place this trem is sort of tight. We want to see these springs flex, because right now you could pull them out with your hand because they're not very tight. So we pull the strings back until they're really taut, and then we take a couple of measurements that we need to take. Well, one is you need to measure how big the cavity is in this way, and the next one is you have to measure the back of the trem to the wall of the cavity, like so, and then the measurement down into the cavity up to the wall. And you cut out a piece of wood that fits in there. Make it a little bit shorter so it doesn't go all the way up to the edge. And then we can press that in here. Might need to use a hammer and just tap it in place. And it sounds like I'm hitting it a lot harder, but that's because there is a bunch of springs on the trem and on the back side. So something like that. Now it's flush and nice, and we can pull the spring back a little bit. And the reason why we pull the springs back a little bit is just because we don't want the springs to be under that much tension for that long. That's not what they're supposed to be like when you're using a trem. They're not actually supposed to always be under tension. And I've said this before in other videos, so I'm not gonna talk about it too much. Let's move on to the next part. But just know it's a good idea to have them a little bit under tension, but not too much. Like, you're supposed to be able to press them down, something like this. Okay, so it's time for the tuners. Just put the tuners in like this and finger tighten the washers on the other side. That lets you move them like this without too much issue. Now, line them up with the hole where the little screw is going to go, and put a metal ruler or something that you know is straight on the back like this, and see if it lines up. If it doesn't, and it looks all weird and wonky, the holes need to be plugged with a little wooden dowel. You can take like a toothpick or something and some wood glue. And then you need to just line them up, put a metal ruler like this on the back, and you need to make a little mark with an awl. You just take it like this and just stab it, and then take them off, drill the holes, make them maybe 5 mil or something. This is about 13 mil thick, so if you go 5 mil, that will be good enough. And then you just line them up again, put them in place, and screw them in. And then you'll be where I am now. So now I can just take those tiny little screws, screw them in, and then I can tighten these down real hard. So it's time to attach the string trees, and if you look real close at them, one of them is taller than the other one, and it goes in here, and it's just because the angle of the strings right there is gonna be steeper, so they need more space to move in. And we're just gonna screw these in, but we're not gonna screw them all the way down, because the thing is, sometimes you can feel like the strings are being pulled harder, and the way you fix that is by adjusting these string trees so that they don't pull too much. So we're just putting them in, and it's kind of loosely. They're just in there enough so that they won't accidentally come out, but we can adjust them to pull at the string in relation to the ones that are not being pulled, so that everything feels nice. We'll do that later when we actually put strings on. I'm just going to stretch the strings with my string stretcher, and I'm going to retune the guitar and do that a couple of times, and then we'll be back tomorrow when everything is finished, because it's getting pretty late now. So I'll see you soon. Okay, so I'm back the next morning, and I've been able to play the guitar during the evening and stretch strings out, and also get a sort of feeling for what I need to do for the setup. And here's the guitar, as you might remember from just a couple of seconds ago for you. Okay, so I have the strings pulled to the side, and I have my nut here, and here I have a pen, which I hope you can see. There it is. Here I have a pen that I have split down the middle. I've also put a piece of masking tape on it, just so I don't smudge up everything with lead. And now I can just put this on top of the frets like this, and move it up to the nut, and just let it ride along like this. And where that line, that's how deep I can make the grooves for the strings, so that they won't bust out on the first fret, but also won't be hard to press down. So I'm gonna just deepen these grooves a little bit so that they are just over this line. And on the camera it sort of looks like they're already there, but in reality here where I sit, I can see that I can take away a little bit to just make the guitar a little bit nicer. And that's what this whole series is about. It's about the small things you have to do to make things a little bit better. And if you have perfectly cut slots in your nut, you will definitely feel a difference, even if you've only taken away 1/10 of a mil or something like that, or 1/2 mil. You know, it's a very small amount. You might think it doesn't matter, but I promise you, when you play the guitar, you will feel a difference. So I'm just going to cut these real quick, and I'll be back, and we'll look at the next part. So I've fixed the nut, and it's looking pretty good. And now I've just adjusted the neck with my notched thread edge and a little Allen wrench to make everything straight and nice. And I are just gonna have a tiny bit, just a little bit of relief in the neck. So just a little tiny up bow. And so remember, righty tighty, lefty loosey. Just gonna loosen the truss rod ever so slightly. I'm gonna remove this. And there it goes. Just a tiny little crank like that, and we'll check it. And just a little bit more. Something like that. Just a tiny bit. It's like you'll get a light coming from this side, and you'll just barely shine through. Tiny little bit. Let's move on to the next part. So here we have the bridge, and we're just gonna adjust these. And we're gonna start off by looking at fingerboard and see how much we can get these down. So I'm just putting these in here, and I'm just turning them about maybe 1 whole turn each. And I'm looking at it, And I'm just going to go around, taking all of these down like this, just giving them one turn around. So I put it in, it's facing right here, I turn it around back there. And I go to the next saddle, and I'm just going to do this. And we'll just try to get a general height for all of them. And since mine are very high up, I'm just trying to get them a little bit lower. Okay, so now I've gotten them down to a height that I think is sort of nice. I think I want to take them down a little bit more, but just to show you what I'm doing is I'm playing all the notes down the neck, like every note like this. And so on. Obviously not that fast. Really listening to them, making sure they're not buzzing or anything like that. And then I'm just lowering it and lowering it. You'll get to a point where the strings are lying on the frets, and when that's happening, you can't really play the guitar. So obviously you can't have that low of an action, but you can get a really, really low action. I'm at about a little under 2 mil, which is perfectly fine. I feel like that's okay. But now I want to focus a little bit more on the saddles. And you can take your sanding block, that is the same radius as the fretboard. You can hold it up like this, and you can see what sort of curvature you have, because you kind of want to match the curvature. And I can see that my curvature is a little bit flat in the middle, which means that I either have to take the outer ones down a little bit more or raise the one in the middle. And because the string's in the middle, the G and B, no, the G and D string will be even lower now than the other ones. That means that maybe I should take down the ones on the outside to lower the action even more. Or possibly the opposite and raise the ones in the middle. I think I'm going to do some in-between thing where I raise these a little bit and I lower the other ones a little bit. And the reason why I'm thinking of doing it that way is just because I'm kind of happy with the action the way it is right now. And I feel like I don't really want to change it that much. You sort of have to have the action somewhat set up to how hard you play. And since I'm the kind of player that will play really softly and go up to something really hard, like... And the guitar is obviously not tuned correctly right now, so I know that. I hope you realize that. I know that. So for me, a height that is somewhere in between, that allows me both to play really hard and really soft, is necessary. But if you're one of those guitarists that only plays really light, then you can set up your action for that in mind, because you have to think about how big of a movement the string will have. If you're playing really light, you might have just a tiny little bit, but if you play really, really hard, the string might go all over the place. And obviously you will have a kind of fret out or buzz sound if you play really hard on strings that are really low. So I'm just going to adjust this a little bit, and I'm going to match it up to this, and I'll be back real soon. Okay, so the next step after the string height is the way you want it to be. And just to clarify, just because someone is probably going to understand, I like to level my frets to the point where I feel like if I have a mil of string height from the frets, that's a good starting point to work on. It's not that I want that height, it's just where I feel like if you have that as a standard, then most other standards anyone else has will work on that, because you can always get higher, and most people want higher than 1 mil. Anyway, next step is adjusting these for intonation. And what you do is you take one string, and I'm not gonna do it on camera because it's gonna take too much time, because you have to go back and forth a lot. You just take one string, you play it, you tune it, and then you hold it down on the 12th fret, and you see how much you have to move this, and you just adjust. And every time you play it open after moving this, it will be detuned, so you'll have to tune it again. So I'm gonna go and do that now, real quick. Well, for you it's gonna be real quick. See ya. So, here's the guitar. It's finished now. I just want to point out a thing before we get to what it sounds like. The bridge needs to come forward a little bit. The holes were not drilled in the right place, so the bridge can't really be intonated perfectly. I'm off a little bit. Hopefully you still get sort of an idea of how it sounds, but mainly the focus here is on making the guitar play and feel good, and I can't really show you that. But Anyway, so as hopefully you can hear that the amp is on right now. The amp is on, and there is not a lot of background noise. If I put my finger on the metal parts, we don't get any weird buzzings or weird noise sounds, so the grounding works really nice. Now keep in mind that you can't really trust the sound you hear on any YouTube videos. There's a lot of thing going on, but the way I'm recording is straight into the camera with a microphone on top. You can see a little bit of it here. So, just so you know, don't fully trust it. But anyway, so here's the guitar. Anyway, this is what it sounds like clean. Okay, so now we're gonna plug this pedal in that I just received a week or so ago, and I'm gonna rehouse it, so there's gonna be a fun video about that because I think I have a fun idea. But anyway, our distorted sound is gonna be through this, and the reason why is because I'm using a Fender practice amp, the kind of thing you get when you start playing guitar. And I think most of you, if you're beginners, or if you're playing this sort of, you know, beginner guitars, you would probably also have maybe a Behringer pedal. And since this is my newest Behringer pedal, I'm gonna plug that in and let this be the distortion. So we're gonna play some fuzz, which I also think will fit together with this guitar. So let's plug this in and see what it sounds like. First off, we have the guitar body here, and we're not going to focus on the electronics, I mean the plastics or the hardware, only the body, just so you know. I usually have two pens with me when I do this, and one is black and one is white, and it helps me decide what I want to do. And the white might not be used because I think the black will be visible on the red. So I'm just telling you that I have two because sometimes you have a black guitar that you're gonna relic, and if you're gonna relic a black guitar, you'll need a white pen. So we'll just look at the body and we'll try to imagine, you know, some sort of wear. Like maybe, for example, cable have been, you know, pulled out and punched in, and, you know, you've been playing the guitar and, you know, sometimes you miss with the cable when you try to plug it in. So maybe you have like a little ding, let's say here. I'll just make a little relic marks with the pen. And I don't really think so much about like shape. I'm not trying to draw in a shape because that's the key, I think, to this process. I'm just making mark where I want to see some relic. And maybe something down here, some little ding or something. So I'm not looking to like paint in the structure of how I want the break to look. I'm only making marks for where I want the mark and not for what kind of mark, because if you do that, you're gonna get too structured into how you want it to look and not so much of what it actually should look like, because it is a natural way. The way things break is different than the way we want it to look, basically. I hope that makes any sense. Up here I want a little bit of player wear, make some, just a couple of lines here like that. Then I want a little bit of player wear up here, that. And maybe a small chip out up here. Yeah, and definitely maybe, what the hell. Anyway, and maybe something down there as well. Maybe something up here, because I do have a little bit of a weird discoloration up here. well, it's not actually discoloration, it's just the two different transparent lacquer lying on top of each other. Something like that, I think, because you don't want to go overboard. And so we'll start off with a brand new razor blade and we'll just scrape away. This is where obviously what kind of lacquer you've used comes into play, and making sure that you're using something that looks authentic. And I'm not putting a lot of pressure down at all, I'm just basically just scraping it lightly away, trying to get it to break. And I'm gonna have it go down on the side a little bit. It might be a little hard for you to see, but you have to think about the fact that it's not gonna be the surface, the flat surface that it hit. It has to be the edge. Take something, make it feel a little bit uneven. I'm just taking my blade and I'm sort of trying to mimic it being like the tip of the blade, just mimic it being the tip of the cable, and just like, oh, it's been punched in like that. You have to sort of imagine what could have happened to a guitar. Just play your guitar a little bit and ask yourself, like, have you ever plugged it in and missed the jack, for example? And you might say, no, never, but it's like, well, if you played guitar for more than, you know, a week or something, then, you know, yes, you have, like, one of those things that happens. Doesn't mean anything, like you're not a good guitarist or anything like that. It's just, I don't know what I'm trying to say, it just happens, basically. Drag the blade across first, reveal the wood underneath, and then let's just try to break up the surface a little bit by moving the blade back and forth. And just trying to break up the lacquer a little bit. And just by like doing small movements, sort of like this, it's sort of like the opposite of doing a good job, which is kind of in a weird way what you want to do, because if you know how to scrape, which I mean isn't super low complicated skill, you know that the point is to make nice even movements, and this is the opposite. And just making more small little jabs like that right here, which I hope you can see, is like the key. Basically, you need to have that. And right here where the print is, I want to be extra careful because I do want to keep the print, but it's also where the natural wear would be really noticeable. Try to like blend it in a little bit and just slowly and very, very lightly, almost not touching, go over parts of the flower so that it breaks off in a uneven but also sort of natural worn kind of way. If you look up there at the flower, I hope you can see that it has a couple of marks and things in it. Let's work a little bit on this upper here. And just try to break away the lacquer. And then just clean it up a little bit to remove some of the lines that are still left, the dark coloring. And I can feel already that this is pretty good, because you're basically stabbing the guitar, almost you could say, with your pick. Something like that. And now I'm gonna put in a couple of lines, but not too many, taking the edge of the razor blader and going in at a kind of steep angle, and I'm gonna try to come from underneath the trim, draw in the lacquer. Because the blade is very sharp and very thin, it will leave fine lines, and I'm just trying to not really think about the movement and just let it like almost dance. I don't know if you can see how my hand is moving, but I'm basically just dragging it across the lacquer, and I'm just first doing short little thin spurs out in all direction, going around, and just try to almost think of like an, what are they called, ice dancer people. They are the ones who dance on ice, you know, just like almost like move the blade like in a, almost like you don't know you want to do or where you want to go. Hold them up to something, because these sort of lines will appear from somewhere. So you have to think like, oh, there's a screw, so there might be lines going out in all directions from that. Here is the trem, it rests here, it might have lines going out in all directions. Here is another perfect place for it. There's a screw, you can have lines going out in all directions from there. Then you just put the blade up to the closest you can get to the screw, and you just make lines. And you make some lines a little bit more squiggly, and make other lines a little bit more straight, and you make some go in weird odd directions, and you just freehand it a lot. And here, that's the key, like freehand. If you think too much about these things, you will have something that looks fabricated, and it doesn't look like it's made by chance. So we're just gonna do this, go around like this, all across, and I'll be back when I've done it. And the same thing goes here, like I'll put a couple of them in between here, but I'll focus on the screws. You just like think of the screw like almost like an explosion out like this, and you have like ice cracks going in all directions, and that's sort of what I'm doing right now. And we're gonna do some other relic like this soon. Okay, so now I've gone around and I've made some lines, and I don't know if you can see them, but that's okay, you'll see them soon. Now I'm just gonna slowly drag the blade across as well. As I start up here, I barely touch the body, and as I get closer to the middle here, I press harder and harder and harder, and then I pull them out again. And that's just because I want the cracks to not seem like they jabbed in and dragged across. Like, that's normally how you see lines appear when someone has stabbed something. It will have an entry and a slit out and come out. And we want to avoid that. So, and I'm just doing a lot of lines, because if you look real closely at a old crackled finished guitar, you will see a lot of lines going in all directions and stuff like that, especially around this area here. And I'm not pushing down hard at all, I'm basically just trying to break the lacquer. I have a very thin paint job on this, so it's not hard at all. And try to not have a desired outcome. Try to have more of a just moving. Okay, so I've dragged the blade across all over and made some more imperfections over here, just, you know, to make it look a little bit even. I suggest you go back and forth a little bit more maybe than I am doing right now. You know, you hold the guitar away from yourself and you look at it and you're like, oh, I need to add a little bit more or something. And you work slowly, because it's very easy to take off too much. Anyway, we're gonna move on to the next step. We will have a cup with a little bit of water. We'll take some brown acrylic paint. I've seen people do this with black, but I think it's too much. And we'll just do a tiny dab of acrylic paint. The reason why I use brown and not black is because I feel like it's supposed to be dirt and, you know, particles of skin and stuff like that we're replicating here. And aging of the lacquer, you know, things like that. Black is, you know, it's too extreme, basically. It's too unnatural. And then we're just gonna mix it in the cup. We get this really watery amber heard thing going, you know. So yeah, and then we're just gonna paint this on the body like this. Move it across, kind of forcefully moving the pencil, you know. We're sort of pushing this into the body. And if you get a little bit on the pickguard like I do right now, it doesn't matter, because most of this we're just gonna clean it off. And we'll let that sink in for a couple of minutes and almost dry. Okay, so now I'm just gonna move some tissue across the surface and just pull off whatever is on top. lines are a little bit more defined now. They stick out a little. Makes the finish look a little bit crackly and weird. And not by much. And you can go over it again, which I actually might do. I might actually, just because I have so much water, I might just take a dab like that and take my pencil that is already covered in water and just smear this around. If you want to do a really, really good job, you'll do this with different amounts on different places, just trying to really create some difference, because obviously these sort of like lines will have different amounts of dirt in them. The lines there are maybe even more defined now. So let's flip the guitar over and take a look at the back side and what kind of relic we would do there. So here is the body, and we are going to do some relicking here as well. So we take our pen and we start thinking like, okay, well, maybe the body has, maybe it has a little ding down here, or maybe something up here, something there. These corners here where the belly card begins are always a spot where something happens, I feel like. Maybe a little bit here. And then here we'll move in and we'll have a little bit of relicking. And again, I'm just marking out sort of where I want it and where I kind of want it to move, because I don't want too much, obviously, because too much will be too much, too much. Sorry, but also I don't want like a perfect outline. I know I've already said this, but just something like that maybe, because I just feel like it might actually even be too, I don't know. No, I think this will be good for now, at least. Yeah, so I'm just going to do the same thing that I did on the front on the back. Scrape away all the black marks, pull the knife away from all these edges here where the screws have been, and then dragging the blade across, doing this sort of dance thing, and then painting it in. And I'll be back after that. So just before we continue, I just want to show you the back quick. It has a bunch of dings and scratches and a bunch of scratches. Yeah, just a bunch of dings and scratches, basically. Something like that. And like you can really go from the holes here and really go out in all directions, basically. And then just try to imagine like buckle rash, you know, it's sort of the same thing as the arm thing, but a little bit rougher. And again, try to take off as little as possible. The lines in the lacquer you can go a little bit crazy on because you need a lot of them. But yeah, let's go back to the front here. Okay, so you can basically stop here if you want to. I'm pretty happy with the guitar the way it looks, but we have some rough areas like this that I just want to touch up a little bit. And the way I'm going to do that is I have here a bottle of vinegar that a bunch of nails have been rusting in, and it will have a chemical reaction with the wood, so I'm just going to dab it on. Now, you have to think about this a little bit, actually. I know some people are like, oh, I'm just going to dab it on, but the thing is, you kind of want to see like where, how do I explain this in a good way? Do it unevenly, is what I'm trying to say, because it's not gonna, you can actually see in real time here as I'm talking how much it affects the wood. I hope you can see it on the camera, I don't know, but it's super effective. So I'm just gonna put this on some places, and the thing is, this is one of those things, I see people put it on everywhere and they love that darker wood look, but the thing is that it's where your sweat gets it, where you would really have this. So even though, you know, obviously over 50 years or something, your sweat would get almost everywhere on the guitar, it will definitely be on some places less than other. So really think about that and make sure you put it on unevenly, and that you have some places, like down by the strap button example, you're not gonna put sweat there. So don't put too much there. Put a little bit to darken up the wood, but don't too much. You haven't left the guitar out in the forest for, I don't know, 10 years or something. So don't make it look like you've done that. That's what I'm trying to say. Same thing if we go back up here. Like here is where we really need to work it in. I'm just gonna put this on here and I'm just gonna sort of just go over and over here. And yeah, and here you could really put on like maybe even 3 quotes, maybe something like that. And we'll just see what happens basically. So yeah, I'll be back real soon once I'm happy with the discoloration. Okay, so here's a couple of close-ups. Here you can see the relicking that has occurred throughout the pickguard wear. Looks pretty good. I feel like it's close to what I would say it would actually look like. And here we have the side relicking and the sticker, and you can see how it's a little bit darker and then it gets a little bit lighter, and it has some difference in color. And also this rose here has really been starting to peel away and been sanded off, and things are starting to deteriorate up here, and it looks sort of natural at least. And here we have some light checking showing through. I hope you can see it, and a little bit of damage. It's a little bit gray, but it's not the same as the other, because here you wouldn't get that much of the sweat and things coming in, but you would still get a little bit of the natural darkening of the wood, but it wouldn't be this, and it wouldn't be the same as the other places. And finally here you can see like it's gone really deep in here, and this is also parts where it's up against the body, and you can see difference. Like here it's not as dark as it is right here. Moving up here it's a little bit more grayish. Here it's almost a little bit of a blackness to it, you know, just different shades moving up. And here's just a little bit of wear, just to show off, and it also a different coloration happening. And here is the other horn, as you can see, or not the other horn, but the other top of the belly carve, and it looks pretty good. Well, there you have it, the guitar. If you liked the video, please don't forget to give a thumbs up, and also if you would subscribe, I would appreciate that very much. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I would appreciate if you did. Until next time, stay awesome and cool, and go and, I don't know, relic a guitar. I think you should, because it's actually really fun.